So with the same people, the same fleet, by improving the efficiency, keeping it all in-house, your revenue will increase £2 million.
Yeah.
So Dan, on the last interview, we
Yes.
spoke about the first deal, the first mega deal, and you've got yourself a very, very profitable business, lots of assets, a business to be proud of. So tell us what happened right after you've bought the business and bring us up to date to where you are now, what the plans are for the future, the next deal and so forth.
Okay, so I suppose the first thing you do is you obviously get everyone in and talk to the team. So I've been blessed. It's a good team. There was probably one person in the team who was of concern, who actually left the business literally just as the deal was being done. But I was blessed with him leaving, and I'll talk about his legacy in a minute. So we had a new guy arriving at the same time, and this was to run the sort of workshop and the fleet. But the rest of the team is intact. It's the same people. So there was that initial conversation with them. They were thankfully very positive about the change. So I think they welcomed having some new leadership coming in.
I think it's interesting that you should say that, because that is often the case.
It is, yeah.
Despite the sort of the enduring loyalty to the former owner, there is the excitement that sometimes that ideas will be listened to, things will be modernized, a bigger, brighter future ahead.
I think the owner had sort of checked out to a certain extent. It had been a very long process buying the business. So that can't have been easy, the uncertainty of that. So there's the initial thing of meeting the new team. And then you do this thing where you set about getting into the business and finding out what it's really like as a business. And some things were good, some things were bad. So the bad thing, there were a couple of people in the business who I was told were critical, really. I couldn't afford to lose them. One was the sort of number two, the sales director guy, who's great, and he is critical to the business, and he's a very good guy. The other one was this guy who was down in the workshop, who was a fitter on these vehicles, and he was described as, I think in the vacuum excavation world, I was told that he was, if he didn't know it, it wasn't worth knowing, basically. It was the complete opposite. So to cut a long story short, we got him out. And one of the things about when you find something that's not right in a business, it can be a very big opportunity. There are basically two metrics that are important. There's how much we charge for a vehicle a day, for the renting it out with a bloke to run it, and the various extras.
And what I'm going to just add in there, Dan, if you don't mind me interrupting, because some people may not be watching these videos in order. So this is the part two, where you bought this vacuum excavation business as an eight-figure deal for your first deal.
Yeah.
And we're now talking about what's happened since you've bought it.
So you've got the price per day, and then you've got this thing which airlines know all about, which is utilisation. So 440,000 a pop for a new one. They need to be out working. I've sort of worked out the industry seems to be working at around 70%. And the reason for that is most people service the truck part and the actual sort of vacuum excavation with third parties. Certainly in the UK, if you need your truck serviced, your average, even the Mercedes dealerships, are quite happy to take weeks before a part will arrive, and you've lost your asset. So there was a great opportunity to bring all of this in-house. So between the end of June, when the deal went through, and the end of August, we sort of sorted all of that out. Staff changes, we got lots more fitters in, which are sort of steadied down now. We had a bit of turnover with them. I was fairly ruthless about that. But we've started bringing the maintenance in-house, and we've just, in the new year, finished installing a vehicle inspection pit, as well as these things that jack them up. So we can do everything you need to do HGV-wise, apart from the MOT in-house.
So what impact does that have on the business?
Well, the impact in simple terms is if you do the run rate with the same sort of capacity, if you like, with the fleet, your 5.2 should be 7.2.
So tell us what that means.
Million revenue.
Million, right.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So 70%.
So with the same people, the same fleet,
yeah,
by improving the efficiency, by not sending vehicles out to be mended, serviced out of the business, but keeping it all in-house, your revenue will increase £2 million
Yeah. So if you get
and
to a
you've got
high
a 40%
utilisation,
margin.
yes, yeah. Now there's extra cost in there, but the interesting thing
Sure,
is
sure.
your cost dynamic changes. So instead of your top 5 costs being third party maintenance people, etc., it's now more headcount and stuff like that. But the two sort of balanced each other out so far. There were 12 excavators out the back, which they're like miniature ones. They're not on a truck chassis. They're remote controlled on these tracks. So they were just sitting out the back. He never really did much with these, and we are now. So that's added a further injection
So,
of revenue.
and you already own those assets.
We already own them outright. Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's all about, so in a business, I suppose when you take it over, it's good if you have some things that are bad, if you can turn them into value, because then
That's interesting because so
that's
many
quite a
people
good thing.
look for perfect businesses to buy. And
Yeah,
when diligence shows something isn't quite right, they go, oh, well,
mm,
I'm walking away
that's right.
from this deal.
Yeah.
When actually you're seeing those situations as an opportunity.
The other thing is that when your fleet's more reliable and you're turning things around quicker, if something breaks down on site and you can send a fitter to fix it quickly, that gives confidence to your salespeople. They're much more confident about maintaining that higher utilization. So the business was there all along.
So you might have been losing business by the sales team saying, well, we can get a truck to you, but it won't be for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you know that you can turn it around
Yeah.
across the weekend. And am I right in saying, unless I'm getting confused with another conversation I've had, is that you've now got a 7-day-a-week? Is that different?
No, there was always a 7-day-a-week, 24-hour
Right.
capability. What I introduced was in the maintenance of the vehicles,
Okay.
so that all of the fitters, the HGV technicians, they do 4 days on, 4 days off through the 7-day week.
And that's something that you introduced?
Yes, yeah.
And
So
what was it before?
it was Monday to Friday.
Okay.
But they also they did work on weekends, but it was done on a sort of stressful way. So it was like, we've got to fix this truck for Monday, therefore you must come in and do overtime. And the guy would say, I've done the last 4 weekends, I'm not doing this one.
Yes.
You have
So
to.
you've
No,
introduced a
I'm
new
leaving.
rotor
That kind of
that
stuff.
has better coverage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And therefore that improves your efficiencies because those vehicles are back on the road faster.
Now, all of that is possible because we've got a fleet manager who knows all of that stuff. The previous incumbent who, not through luck rather than design, who left just as the deal was going ahead, he didn't have the right capability for that. Very often some of the bad people are very good at pushing you away. They've got the spiel to suggest that everything's as it should be, but is to get into the detail and look at what's happening and ask yourself, what are the main metrics of my business? What should I be doing?
If you want to find out how to buy a business successfully, get your free business buying toolkit. The link is in the video description below.
Would you describe yourself as a numbers person?
I am, but it's not my. I mean, I'll talk about numbers in a second, but I am a numbers person because I've had all this time working in operations in big business. But I don't think being focused on numbers. So a lot of consultants are like this when you get them in. They will show you spreadsheets and they'll go on about private equity do it. But it's not that the numbers won't fix anything. They just measure things. The reality is motivated people, having the right people, being out and about in the business, asking the right questions. So getting people to do their own numbers.
And has that come, do you think, from your military background?
Well, the leadership bit definitely started in the military. I'd say DHL was like that. I spent 11 years with them working in a business like that where you're doing transformational change.
Yeah.
So I'd say sort of all the way through, but you can't lead a business from a desk pumping out numbers. I look at private equity businesses from my previous life, and they're very interesting because they often go into numbers in great detail, and they'll say, if we cut that head out or if we make that tweak and add all these things together, it looks much better, doesn't it? But they have to do that because they bought the thing in the first place for twice as much as they should have done. You need to spend time with people, understand what makes them tick, what motivates them. Another thing I've learned in business is in my 30s when I ran the DHL operation in Romania, and it was a very tough turnaround to save the business there and then grow it. And it was a big break for me. I was successful doing that, and it led to lots of other things. But one of the things I learned doing that, you can be quite aggressive. You can, in that instance, I took a whole management team out and replaced it. The worst thing you can have in a business is fear. So if people are scared, and there was quite a lot of fear in the business when I took it over, and if people are scared, they won't speak up, they won't take risks. They'll be constantly scared about making mistakes, and they all sort of hunker down, and then nothing happens. So you don't want fear in your business. You've got to reassure people that the business is doing well, that what they're doing is good, but maybe they could do this as well. That kind of approach, I think, has worked quite well. But they're a good team of people in the business. And I think one thing I did learn from the army, which the army is good at, is if you've got 8 average people in a team that's gelled as a team and they're working together, they are worth twice as much as 8 supermen and women in a team who don't get on and are all competing with each other, and you've got this sort of toxic environment.
Interesting.
That will always be trump that, both in terms of being a nice place to work, but also performance.
And it's the consistency and
consistency,
reliability. Yeah, absolutely. Rather than sort of.
And if you need an expert on something, well, you can get them in for a bit to help set it up. But the rest of the business seemed to be pretty good. There's lots of opportunity there, and we want to grow the business. And I'm sure lots of other small business owners have the same thing. There are lots of holes still to be plugged. We need to do much more on the marketing side, true marketing. We've got a very good sales guy, but we can probably do a lot more on that side of things.
Build that team, yeah.
We're digitizing the business. We're bringing in an IT system that will run everything, bringing in more resources. I've got a guy I know very well who's running training programs, so we're overhauling all of those. We're diving into health and safety, which is the one thing that terrifies me, is we have a cock up with that. So we have to get better at that. The other thing, going back to the military thing, was concurrent activity. So if you've got the right team of people and they're empowered and they feel they can do stuff, you're being successful when things are happening at once. Yes. Instead of you just doing one, we're now going to do the new IT system. And you wait for that to
And you
finish.
can only do one thing at a time. So you've only got
So
the
you want
bandwidth to handle one thing at a time.
Right. And I always say, if you can get into your operation and things are happening that you didn't know about because you haven't activated them, and you think, oh, what are you working on? Oh, I'm doing a project on X. When you get to that point, then you really know it's working, because everyone's starting
That's a really interesting
to work on their own. And we're not quite there with that yet. Maybe we're not big enough.
But you've improved the business in terms of profitability really well in a very short space of time.
And I'm very proud of it. But the team's done most of that. But it's about enabling them to do it.
You've enabled them to do it. So
now, there is one thing I did forget with the team is when we were in the final sort of 6 months of the deal, the lender said to me, and this goes to a point you've made a few times, they'd prefer to have an experienced finance director in the company. Now, I didn't want to give up any equity at the start, but I agreed I would give up some equity and I would take on a finance guy. So they introduced me to somebody who's excellent. He's a really, and I don't regret taking him on at all. It's partly the specific work he's doing, but it's nice to have someone else who's done something similar.
Yes.
In a similar industry, who's your ally, if you like.
And do you own 100%?
My wife and I own 85%. You've made a point recently in a couple of the sessions about having certain aspects covered. And that was worth its weight in gold. That was well worth doing.
Yeah.
So
wonderful. That sounds like a really good plan.
Buying a business is a roller coaster, which is why you need a lawyer who knows what he is doing. So why not use mine? His name is John Andrews, and you can find his contact details below this video.
So what happens next then? Tell us about your plans for the next 12 months.
So my initial plan was, worst case scenario, buy the business, pay off the deferred element over the first year, that small amount, and just run the business as it was for the first year. Get to the end of that first year.
Pick up on something you said there.
Yeah.
You said that small amount, that was $1 million, right?
Yeah.
Because percentage-wise, it is a small amount.
Yes,
isn't it?
But it's still quite a lot of money from your cash flow.
Yeah. And that must be coming up to the
end of June
being paid off now.
Payment. Yeah, that was my sort of minimum. If everything was fantastic and I couldn't change much, or if things were difficult, and then after that to start to invest in organic growth. But as a minimum, I could sit on the business for 5 years, pay off all the debt, and just sell it as it was with a bit of growth. Getting a few vehicles in a year. And it would be very nice. So that's my sort of minimum.
So if you basically it's do nothing,
Yeah,
and it's still a great result.
yeah. Or as has been the case, if there's lots of opportunity there to do better when we already are doing better, then maybe be more aggressive with the future organic growth plans, which we are being. We're getting another 7 vehicles this year coming in, so we're leasing them in,
Okay.
and we'll carry that on into next year. So go for a bigger growth story, so we've got something very attractive to sell.
Mm-hmm.
Digitized business, modern management team, state of the art health and safety, much more modern, bigger fleet, revenue doing that.
Sounds
Good
very
thing
good
to sell. And
Yes.
then, of course, the other aspect is acquisition. So, as I said when I came in, we've got one very strong lead already to do another acquisition, not quite as big as us, but sizable. So, I'm hoping to do at least one of those. And that's really, as you teach, it's the best way to grow, to do the acquisitions. So, we're looking
So
at
that would bring your revenues in at over 10 million at that point.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, organically, we should be able to get, we should be butting up against that by the end of next year
Really?
without doing an acquisition. The biggest risk with someone like me, I've spent my life diving into things and sort of fixing them. I like it, or I have liked it, and doing that. So my biggest risk with this is I dive into this business and never come out. And in 10 years' time, I'm running it. It will be successful, but I haven't been a
Sure.
deal maker. Really, towards the end of this year, I'm looking at putting in the number 2 in the business into a GM role. I'll probably call him that, and then maybe an MD after a year, but start to step away. So very closely coaching the person rather than doing it, so that I can step back as a deal maker
Yes.
and go and do some more deals. And I'd probably team up with the finance guy who's come in.
Whatever happens,
Yeah.
it's a great outcome. Whether you do nothing,
Yeah.
whether you go for some gentle growth,
Yeah.
whether you go for some aggressive growth, or
Yeah.
whether you add acquisitions, which I've got a feeling
Yes,
you will be adding some, then whichever way you cut it, you end up with a really, really strong business with a very high value. And to think that you started off looking at all different types of businesses.
Yes,
You
amazing,
looked at,
isn't it?
what did you say you looked at? You looked at
training,
training,
security posts, these steel security posts, manufacturing, hair salons,
hair salons.
what
Quite a
else?
difference between hair salons
Facilities
and
businesses.
vacuum excavation. But yeah, I mean, it's quite a remarkable journey. And many of the people who watch our videos and listen to our podcasts are sitting on the fence. They're thinking, is this something I do? What would you say to those people?
I mean, the thing that impresses me about the deal maker sessions and the inner circle meetings we go to, and entrepreneurs in general, is there is no clear, when you meet somebody who's done it, that there's no sort of clear stereotype of the person involved. I think it's a mixture of luck, but making your own luck. I think you've got to have the drive and the hunger to want to do it. Now, there might be all sorts of reasons why you might have to get up and go to do it. But I think it is true that anybody can do it, but also it's the case that not everybody does it. And I think some people, maybe they haven't got the drive or the hunger to want to do it. Maybe their personal circumstances don't allow them to do it. Maybe, their partner doesn't want them to, or,
Sure.
there's all of those sorts of factors. But I would say to anyone who's interested in doing it, it is very possible to do it. Most people that put their shoulder to the door to get through end up getting there one way or another. But I think, going back to my earlier life experience, the only way you really progress and learn in life, in my view, and have a rewarding life is if you step outside your comfort zone. So most human beings are born in the town or village, or they're born in one place. They tend to work close to that. They tend to, never really step out of their comfort zone. They don't go far. But you've really got to step outside your comfort zone and have a bit of faith. And I think the program that you ran, that Deal Makers program, was different to anything else I've done, in that you weren't learning theory. It was a practical process to go through. Now you can step off at any point. I could say, well, I don't want to be a deal maker. I've got my company now and I'm going to run it for 20 years. I could do that. But you don't have to do the whole process. But if you want to buy a business, it definitely works. So I would say get on with it. And I'm a good example of someone who didn't. I spent the best part of 2 years painting a house, gardening, thinking about it, dilly-daddling around. But it won't
Look
happen
at you now.
unless you get out and do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you need a bit
Dan,
of,
you've been
yeah.
a great guest. Thank you very much for your advice. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences. I know a lot of people will benefit from those.